Welcome to Marinade Moments, the show where I tell stories from a life well attended. On this episode, I'm going to tell the tale as best I remember it of cross-Canadian ragweed with shooter Jennings at the Freebird Live in Jacksonville, Florida on February 23rd, 2005. 20 years ago, y'all. Over 20 years ago. Cross-Canadian ragweed is reunited, and I got to tell you, I'm both surprised and excited. My buddies and I were crazy about the boys from Oklahoma in college and shortly thereafter. I don't know how many times I got to see them, but the number is not insignificant. They were road dogs, man. Go look at their schedule from 2000 to 2010. It is an absolute hustle. I don't remember all of the times I saw them. There was one time I saw Ray Wiley Hubbard, Charlie Robison, Cross-Canadian Ragweed, and Robert Earl Keane at Terminal 5 in New York City. That was incredible. I'm pretty sure we road tripped to Athens to see Cross-Canadian Ragweed one time. I saw him in Jacksonville many times. Several times, I should say. Red Dirt in Texas country is having this, I don't know if it's a renaissance or it's just kind of always been there hanging around and then it's getting a pop right now with bands like Turnpike Troubadours and then a whole young kind of group of songwriters that are carrying the torch. Man, it was huge in the early 2000s, and Florida audiences ate it up. I've got stories about seeing Pat Green all over the South. Pat would come to Florida sometimes, and frequently in Georgia and Mississippi. And one time I saw Pat play a fraternity party at Ole Miss. I almost got, in fact, fun fact, I almost got Pat Green to play my own fraternity at the University of Florida. That's a whole nother story for a different day. We were all into Corey Morrow and Pat and Randy Rogers and Stoney LaRue, just to name a few. It's really fun to see the scene evolve and some of these guys have a resurgence. I would have never imagined Cross-Canadian Ragweed reunion would sell out a stadium 20 years later. I saw them in 500 cap and smaller rooms for years. They packed out those places, but still. One of the things that I think I've learned helps a band sustain devotion over decades, though, is that connection with fans. And obviously, Cody Canada and The Departed has been a thing really since Cross-Canadian Ragweed broke up. But I don't know if broke up's even the right word. You know, Cross-Canadian Ragweed always hung around. And again, these are pretty small rooms, but still, it was cool. They always hung around after the shows to take pictures and shake hands and answer questions, autographs. I never really got to know any of them. I wasn't really plugged into scenes back then. I wasn't really covering music or writing about it back then. But I did spend a fair amount of time fanboying out, and to a person, those guys were always so cool. So when the band went their separate ways, that's probably the better way to put it, I kind of lost touch. I really appreciate the work that Cody Canada and The Departed have done, but it just, something felt different to me. Maybe that was fair, maybe it wasn't. Plus, this is like 2010-ish, so this is the age of indie rock and a lot of sonic exploration for me. I'm listening to bands like Spoon and Wilco and a lot of those kinds of bands at the time, as well as, branching out into other genres that weren't necessarily in my wheelhouse per se until a little bit later. And Texas and Red Dirt, though, was still there. It just got shuffled into its own corner of my creative consciousness. And a lot of it was more nostalgia, I think. So with that foundation, let's circle back to this Shooter Jennings and Cross-Canadian Ragweed show at the Freebird. I've talked about the Freebird in this space before. I used to go to shows there all the time. The Freebird Live was a venue in Jacksonville Beach that was originally owned by the widow of Ronnie Van Zant of Lynyrd Skynyrd fame, Judy. I think the whole family might have had a hand in it. If I messed up any of those facts, just somebody politely let me know. It was located on the corner across the street from the ocean, right on First Street in Jacksonville Beach. And it was just a fucking dope venue. 2 stories. I believe it was 500 capacity if you filled both those stories. It always felt like a little divey. It was loud in there. Gosh, I saw George Clinton play there. I saw G Love it wasn't G Love and Special Sauce, but it was G Love with a band. Gosh, I mean, I could go on and on and on about the the shows that I got to see there. It was really cool. They booked the coolest acts. And on this night, Shooter was opening with his band, the 357s. His debut record, Put the O Back in Country, was still really fresh. He had a high-profile relationship with the actor Drea De Matteo of Sopranos fame. And, of course, he's the son of legends Waylon Jennings and Jesse Coulter, right? So, for me, the buzz of getting to see him, even let's just say I didn't love the record, which I did, Put the O Back in Country. I was very into it and still dig it when I still put it on from time to time. The buzz getting to see this man with all of this kind of pedigree behind him was electric. So he comes out with his dad's iconic black and white Stratocaster guitar and played it. Just a memory-searing set. Waylon Jennings is one of the most important artists of my life. A series worth of podcasts would be necessary to articulate how much his work has meant to me. And I would have been okay with his kid doing something similar. I say his kid, right? He obviously is his son. Shooter's about my age. I think we're almost exactly the same age, very close, not much more than a year apart if we are. I would have given him a pass, if he couldn't even lived up to that lofty legacy. But the thing that I've loved about Shooter's whole career is that he's forged his own path. And by all accounts, I've only, I don't know the guy, but by all accounts, he's just a real down-to-earth, very cool guy, very easy to work with. And one of the better producers in my mind, especially in American roots music, doing it right now. Brandi Carlile and American Aquarium, and we could go on and on and on with the work that Shooter has done. And he has remained seemingly one of the most down-to-earth people in the business, and it's been that way for 20 years now. So he plays this incredible set. He only had that one record's worth of songs at the time. So it's perfect for an opening set. And then Cross Canadian Ragweed takes the stage to their normal, fervent, more than a little buzz crowd, right? You got to remember the context here. Cody Canada is 49 years old now, I think. I had to look that up. So he's about 5 years older than me, 4 or 5 years older, which makes sense. Because that means I would have been about 24. I would have been 24 when this show occurred. And freshly 24, just a couple months. And he would have been about 28 or 29 at the time. But he felt wise beyond his years. Married, with kids, cool as the day is long. At that same look, that looks like he hasn't hardly aged. He's got that long hair. Just that rock star aura about him. He would play these soaring, almost hair metal solos, and he'd stick his cigarette. He'd always have a cigarette on stage. This is back when you smoked in bars, and he'd stick it in between the strings on his headstock while he played. It was just the coolest damn thing I'd ever seen. And on this particular night, I'm watching all of this. Cross Canadian Ragweed is again crushing it. They always did. They always brought it in a big way. And I felt the presence to my left, a couple songs in, which happened to be Shooter Jennings himself, just standing there in the crowd, vibing. It was one of those crowds. It was like, it was plenty well attended, but you could move around a little bit, kind of a perfect rock club kind of show. And the boys are blasting through this set. We're all singing along. It's just so much fun. And I introduced myself, told him how much I loved his music and the performance, how much his dad's music meant to me, how cool it was to see him play Watosh's iconic Telecaster on stage. I'd gotten to see his dad once. I don't think I was able to tell him that. Once or twice, actually. I think I saw Waylon twice. I remember one set at the county fair in Marion County, Florida, pretty vividly. And then I'm pretty sure I saw him at Silver Springs, also in Ocala. It's just amazing to see him up there with this, if you know anything about Waylon Jennings, you can picture that guitar immediately. So I tell him all this, and Shooter looks at me and smiles. He's wearing sunglasses. He goes, right on, man. And then he goes, keep on keeping on, and then just shakes my hand and wanders off to catch the show from another angle. And I ran into him a couple more times throughout that night and didn't bother him, but it was just fun, looking back on that time and how accessible those guys all were. Seeing a whole new generation of fans getting introduced to Cross Canadian Ragweed is a lot of fun. I'm blown away by how big these reunion shows are. It makes me feel a bit of community that had laid dormant for a couple decades. I'm fortunate that I've been able to find that feeling elsewhere. And then a lot of those acts, Pat Greens of the world, for example, have continued to make records. But I don't know, like that whole thing kind of fell out of my regular rotation for a while. And it's fun to kind of relive those moments, because there's nothing like those shows from your 20s, y'all. And if that's you right now, soak it all in. You won't stop going to shows, but life will make it a little more difficult in the coming years as responsibilities mount. All right, y'all, that's the story of getting to see Cross Canadian Ragweed and Shooter Jennings at the Freebird Live in 2005, as best I remember it. If you enjoyed this Marinade moment, make sure to subscribe to the Marinade on your podcast app. Follow us on social media. Check out our feature episodes of the Marinade with Jason Earl on the same feed. The Marinade is a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode, we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. Consider joining our Patreon, y'all. If you enjoyed this and you want more of it, patreon.com/Marinade Podcast, where you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey and what we're getting down on for just $2 a month. Y'all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers.